Hey guys, it's Miss Leone here, and today we're going to be shading forms using gradation. So the supplies we're going to need are well-sharpened pencils with erasers, a piece of blank paper, and a ruler to make background lines. Alright, so let's begin. So we're going to be titling this Shading Forms Using Gradation. Okay. And we're going to underline that and put your name in the upper corner. Alright, so we're going to be using our gradation technique that we learned in our prior lessons, and specifically with the gradation technique, we're going to lay the pencil down, and we're going to be, when we shade, we're going to be using the side of the pencil in order to shade. So let's begin. So we are going to just first start by splitting the paper in half. So we're only using the ruler for this part. So if you don't have a ruler, a straight edge is fine. We're just going to split this into 6 different sections because we are doing 6 different types of forms. So I'm splitting it in half, and then I'm going to split it into 2 other lines, which will make 6 sections altogether. So I'm going to put vertical lines here and here. And that's it for the ruler. Now we have our 6 sections. Alright, so now to move forward, we're going to start with a sphere. Alright, so as you remember, to make a sphere, we're just starting with a simple circle. So we're going to do it nice and lightly. We're going to make, using our very light sketching, I like to call it like a ghost sketch, because you can always fix it. Okay, so right there I got a little crooked, so because I sketched light, I can fix it. Alright, so I'm just going to erase whatever marks that I don't like that I made, and I can fix it. So let me just adjust this a little bit. So if you have to, I'm just going to turn my page just to finish this off. And round that edge a little better, round this edge. Alright, that way I have a circle that looks nice and round, and then from there I'm just going to go ahead and just lightly, very lightly, make my edges a little more solid. Alright. And you're going to notice I have some sketchy lines in here. That's okay, because when artists draw, we usually sketch really lightly to figure out, to problem solve the proper shape that we're looking to draw. Alright? So once we do that, then we have our circle and we can begin shading. So I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to make a background line. So step 1 for each one of these is going to be to draw the contour line, the outline, and then we're going to be making a background line. So step 1 is to draw the form, and step 2 is going to be to identify the light source. The reason we want to identify the light source is because that's going to tell us where our highlights and shadows are going to go. So if I'm putting my light source right here on the upper left, and I'm only doing this here, we wouldn't do this in like an actual finished drawing, but this is just for learning purposes. So that means that if the light source is coming from here, directly opposite, that's going to be the lightest value, then medium, then dark. And when we're shading rounded forms, the idea is that we're shading softly so it blends nicely into each other. So once I do that, then I'm going to go about 1/3 of the way in, and I'm just going to very lightly, with the side of the pencil, add a very light value, following the shape of the form, so I'm curving with the shape of my form all the way through. Okay, and then where it's going to be meeting the white, I want it to fade out into it. Okay, so what I have to do at that point is I need to go in and soften it. So right here I got a little dark, which is okay. I'll show you what to do. So when we erase, we are not smudging, we're just simply patting it with our eraser edge just to soften it, and we're not smudging it with our finger either. And then I'm just going to make sure that this looks nice and light and it's transitioning into dark slightly. Okay, and again right there got a little too dark, so I'm just going to tap, tap, tap to soften it. Alright, the next step is going to be to go a little farther back, and we're going to start with medium. So we're putting a little more pressure and we're curving it. Now we might end up with a stripe at first, that's okay. We're going to go in and make that smoother once we're done here. Just make sure you don't have any like eraser marks, because that's going to get in your way. Okay, and if you have to turn the page, that's fine to shade properly. Okay, so now I can see that there's like a darker mark here than here, so I want to just gently, where it's transitioning into each other, I'm just going to gently soften that. Really gently, and if you see you got a little too dark, you can just pat, pat with the eraser, but we are not pressing to smudge the eraser, only if we're cleaning up edges. So now we have light, the white of the paper being the lightest value, then light, medium, and now we're going to go in and we're going to start to add pressure for our darkest value here. And I'm following right along the edge. Okay, now on this edge, got a little outside there, so I'm just going to fix that up. Okay, so now I have a big difference here. Now you can see it's like a crescent shape, so I need to soften from there to there. So I'm just going to go in very lightly, very gently, and just soften that transition. Very light, very subtle. You can notice there's no lines. Okay, and then what I love about this technique is actually the edges where we drew this part of the sphere in the form is disappearing. Okay, so that's very important with this shading technique. And when you're drawing and shading, the idea is if you sketch light enough, the edges of the shape, the lines disappear, and the value, right, the shading becomes the edge. So that's the idea there. So now we have that. Now I need to soften where my medium is turning to my light a little more. So there's a lot of back and forth layering. Nice and light, nice and smooth. I'm not going straight, I'm curving, okay? Now once we do that, I'm going to be adding my reflective highlight. Now you won't always see that when you're drawing something from observation, but if you see it, I want you to add it. So for this, we're just going to add a little subtle reflected light, and all we're going to do is with the eraser, just slightly press with the eraser and just get like a little curve. You can see it's a little lighter there, and then if it's too fat, you want to make sure that it's not touching the edge, and we don't want it to be too chubby. We just want it to be very subtle. Now once we do that, it's time for the cast shadow, which is opposite. Alright, now I'm looking at this, I feel like this could be a little softer. So it's constant adjustment, nice and smooth in layers. So from here, okay, I have, it's going to be rounded, and notice I'm figuring out the shape of the shadow. Before I make it darker, it's going to be rounded. I'm using the side of the pencil. I am not shading it using any points. I don't want to see any lines. And I'm going to start shading it in. So I'm going to start light just to make sure that I have the shape, my desired round shape. Once I see that, I'm like, okay, that's cool. Then I can go in and I'm going to start to make it a little darker. So I do want to see the edge, so I have to turn my page here. So also when I shade, I like to keep my pencil facing in, not this way, okay? Facing this side. And we want to make sure that the shadow is dark enough that you can see the edge of the form. Okay. So once I get that shape, I'm just going to go in, fill it in. Make sure it's dark. So this should be the darkest value on this form in this area, the cast shadow. So the reason it's called a cast shadow is because the light source is blocking the light from hitting the surface, and it's casting a shadow from the object, from the form. And then once we do that, we're just going to go in with the side of our pencil and just fill in the background a little bit. Very light, nothing serious. It's really, really light, just to give it a sense of place and atmosphere, a sense of realism. The background should never overpower the main focus. Once you do that, then just go in, make sure you don't smudge anything. And that's it for the sphere. And here I see I got a little dark there, so I'm just going to tap. And you can see that everywhere but pretty much this light area, my line completely disappeared. All right. Next, we're going to go in and we're going to start on the cylinder. Now for the cylinder, we're actually going to be drawing two of them, one standing up, one on its side. So we're going to go here and make our ellipse, which is our oval. Okay. Two lines going down vertically and then curving across. Okay. Then we're going to do another cylinder on this side, standing up. So we're going to do a vertical cylinder. Okay, there we go. So now we have a cylinder, two of them, one standing up vertically, one more horizontally. And to finish step one, I'm going to go ahead and draw my background line. Alright, there we go. So now once we do that, we've got to identify our light source. So our light source for this one is going to come from the upper left, so I'm going to be drawing my light source in the upper left. So this is determining if our light is coming from this way, that means that the upper right, that means the right side is going to be lighter than the dark, and that means the top of this is going to be lighter than the bottom. So we're going to do the same thing that we did for the sphere, but just doing it from the opposite. And I'm going in very lightly with my pencil, a little past half, I would say. Very light. Now this cylinder we're going to make with an open top. So we're going to be getting the inside of it, a little smudge there. Okay, nice and soft. And then we're going to do the same at the bottom. So anytime you're drawing more than one object, whatever drawing you're doing, you start adding value, you really want to get the values all over. Alright, so we started with our lightest value. Now we're going to move in and start to darken a little past that. So maybe half of that. Use a little pressure. So you're going to see a stripe developing. So this is not the gradation shading technique yet because they also have to blend into each other. We have that harsh line. So we're just going to go in and just ever so lightly soften. Okay. And now I might just, seeing how I did that, I might just extend my lightest value out just a little more so it has more transition. And then I can go in here, soften this, just very gently, very lightly, over and over, back and forth, and it starts to get soft and blended looking. Okay, a little more. So you're just going to keep doing that until you see that stripe disappear. Then here, I'm going to add a medium towards this edge and then blend it softly. I'm going to go down here. So we're not doing this top yet because that's not going to be open. That's going to be flat. So I'll show you how to do that at the end. So I'm going to go in and add this strip of like a darker value. Okay, and you notice how my edges, my lines are starting to disappear. Okay. And now that I've done this, I'm noticing that my edge is a little crooked here. So I can go in and just kind of fix that by just going this way a little bit. So it's a constant adjustment. Sometimes you're drawing and you don't realize things at first, and then as you're shading you start to notice. So if anytime you notice, just make those little adjustments. It's no big deal. Alright, so now I got to make that blend into that light value I first made. So again, just like in the one that was standing up, I'm just going to go very lightly back and forth where the medium is touching the light value, nice and soft, and then I might just go in here and just extend this light value into the white a little drop more, just so it's nice and soft. You just want to have a nice smooth transition there, okay? And then finally I'm going to go in and add my darkest value here. It's just going to be like a little strip, nothing too big, because then we still have to blend that into the medium. Okay, so see it has like a stripe there, so all I'm going to do is just very gently blend that into the medium, ever so gently. Very, very gently, nice and soft, nice and smooth. You might have to fix the medium into the light again. It's a constant back and forth process here. And I'm just going to erase anywhere that I got outside the lines. And now you can see that my line on the dark edge has totally disappeared. And I'm going to do that at the bottom now as well. Just like a little strip at the bottom. And be mindful while you're doing this that your hand is not touching the cast shadow of the sphere, because then you can smudge it on your hand. We don't want smudges, so be mindful of where your hand is positioned. So now I have a strip here. Now I've got to smoothen that, so I'm going to go blend it so it gets blended. So notice how I'm not using my finger. No using your finger, guys. I'll notice, right? Using your finger, that's a good little trick, shortcut. But it also smudges it in a way that I can tell. Sometimes we have oils on our fingers, so it's better to learn how to control it first with the pencil by itself, and then use that later on as you need to. But for learning purposes, we are not using our fingers, and we're just want to get rid of that stripe. So sometimes I go back and forth like 8 times, just depends on what you need at the moment. Then I'm going to go in, get my little dark edge in here, have that blending out, okay? Then from there, I'm just going to clean up any edges and start working on my cast shadow. So because I put mine over here, maybe I should have moved it here, but it's too late now, no turning back. My cast shadow, so my light source is here, the cast shadow is opposite. My cast shadow is actually, and this is okay, it's going to go into the sphere section a little bit. That's okay. That's fine. But notice how my shadow changed. It kind of mimics the shape of my cylinder. Okay, so it's kind of existing in the space over there a little bit, which is okay. So I just want to make sure that my cast shadow is dark enough that you can still see my cylinder. You never want the shadow to overpower. You don't want the object bleeding in to the form shape. And then I'm going to go in here. I'm just going to turn my page a little. It helps me to have control over my pencil, especially when I'm going dark. So you can see that even the line of my sections is disappearing, and that's okay. I'm going to go this way just to get this upper edge nice. But notice how I did not, I'm going to turn it this way, I did not use lines with the point of the pencil. I'm only using the point of the pencil to draw, and I'm doing it lightly. Okay? Just to make sure it's nice and dark, and then I can go in and add my little reflective light. That got really bold, so I might go in there and just fix that. So if that happens, now my reflected light just totally went wonky on me. I'm just going to go in and just add value, because the reflected light should just be like very subtle, and I don't want it to be too thick. So I'm just going to go in there and just fix around the area. Down here, I might as well add my reflective light. So if your eraser gets too saturated with pencil, a good idea is to just erase on a clean paper, so then your eraser becomes clean again, and then you can erase. Because sometimes our erasers become saturated with pencil lead, and you try to erase and you're just smearing at that point, because there's just there's no texture of the eraser to get rid of pencil marks. So there I put my little cast shadow, and now this shadow is going to change because it's standing up. And before I forget here, I'm just going to add a little medium value, because this is like a cylinder that has a top, it's flat, this is open, that's why the shadow is opposite, right? The light is hitting this side of the opening, not that, because the back is to that, okay? So then I'm going to go in here. Make my cylinder shadow, mimic the shape there. Once I have the shape I like, okay, that's cool. I'm going to go in and darken it. Okay, let's do this. All right. Then I can just go in, clean that edge. Make sure it's nice and smooth looking. Okay. And now at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and add my background. And there we go, just nice and even. Alrighty. So there we have our two cylinders with our cast shadow and the light source. So let's start with our ellipse. Not too thick, not too thin. Alright, just like that. And then we're going to go in and we're going to be drawing a little tiny dot right in the center. And we're going to connect it. So now, when I just drew this, mine totally did not connect. That's okay, as long as it's ending up that the point is directly underneath, that's fine. And actually looking at mine, I feel like it's a little on the crooked side, so I'm going to fix it so it's okay. You just fix it. There we go. Okay. And make sure here, so right here my line is actually extending to in. So I'm just going to fix that. So that's okay. The key here is, as an artist, we can always erase and fix it. No pressure. There we go. Much better. Alright, so I'm going to draw one cone there, and I'm going to draw another cone facing the opposite way like we did drawing different eye levels. So I'm going to make kind of like if I was going to write the letter A, like that. Make sure they're coming down to the same length. And then I'm going to curve it. I'm just going to turn my page, because certain angles when we draw, they get a little crooked. So I'm noticing here, I think I can fix this angle here. So notice it's very slight, but I fixed my cone. Alright, once we do that, I'm going to make the background. Now be very mindful again, try not to smudge any of the cast shadows that we drew already. Be mindful of where your hand is. So I'm going to draw behind, lift, behind, alright, and there we go. So now we're ready to start shading, but before we shade we have to identify our light source. So step 1 again is draw the outline. Step 2, identify your light source. Our light source is going right over here. Okay, and then step 3, we're going to start shading. And within shading there's also steps. We're starting with the lightest value, so that means if the light source is here, the highlight's going to be on the right side. This is on the right, it's going to be on the right, the dark on the left, and on this side it's going to be lighter on one side. So I'm going to go in on the side of my pencil. I'm just going to shade just like I did to the cylinder. Very lightly I'm shading the inside, half of it. Okay, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to begin to add shading here. So we just want to make sure that it goes along the edge. And then I'm going to go and just very lightly bring out the shading. Okay. There we go. A little more than halfway, almost pretty much halfway, just a little more. Same thing here. I'm going to start and get this angle shaded. Now the trickiest part is going to be in this little corner. Alright, so now that I have my lightest value, I can go in and start adding my medium about halfway, and then make sure it blends into the light. Same thing here. I'm going to go in from the edge, a little more pressure. Okay, and now I did go outside the line a little, so I'm just going to go ahead, just clean up your edges. As you notice, clean it. So now you're going to notice that there's like a stripe. So I'm going to go in and softly blend that together. Nice and soft, nice and subtle. And I'm going to have to go back and forth a few times. Okay. I just want it to be soft. So at this point I might have to add a little drop more highlight. Okay. Just a little tiny drop just to soften it. The idea is that we have the light turning into medium, turning into dark. Up here maybe I got a little too dark there, so I'm just going to tap gently with my eraser. Okay. And now here I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And we're almost done with our rounded forms, and then we're going to move on to the flat ones. So again, it looks kind of like a sharp edge here. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to just tilt my page just a little bit, just so I can control my pencil better. And I'm going to just softly have this blending into the medium, nice and soft. And then here I got a little dark there, so I'm just going to go in and just darken that, lighten it by tapping. And you're just kind of layering it back and forth, just where you need to make it look soft. And then I'm going to bring a little more light out so it has even more transition. And then we're also creating contrast here between the light and the dark. And you'll notice on both of them as well that the edge has disappeared, right? The line on the edge is just solid, and it's solid. And that's the idea there. So now once we're done with that, we're ready to make our shadows. So using the side of the pencil, the shadow, if this is the light, the shadow's going that way. So we just want to be certain that our shadow matches our form above. So here, it's going to look like a cone. Just want the points to touch each other. This might overlap a tiny drop, not too much. Might want to make it a little fatter. But we do it nice and light, so if we have to adjust or erase, we can. We're just figuring it out first. But I'm not using the point of my pencil. Okay, let's see. Let me just quickly fill that in. Not too dark, just trying to get the shape on. Okay, let me just clean that up. I'll go back and darken it. Let me just get my shape for this one. So this reminds me of like a pizza slice. This one here, the point is going to go out like a triangle. So the shape of the shadow always matches the shape of the form. Alright, there we go. Okay, so now that I have my shadows in the right spot, now I can start darkening them. And I just want to make sure, again here, it gets a little tricky because you really want the points to kind of touch each other very subtly. And then we can go in and start to darken it with the side of the pencil. Side of the pencil. Just going to round this a tiny drop since the top of the cone is round. Make sure my edge is not pointy like with a line, but sharp. Okay, And then I'm gonna make this darker, and I'm being careful. So notice how I'm holding my hand kind of above. I don't want to be smudging the other shadows that I made, because those have the most lead in them. So I'm going to darken, and again, we want to make sure that we can still see the edge of the form, that the edge of the form is visible. We don't want it blending in with the shadow. I'm just going to turn my page around just so I can get this little point a little sharper. You might have to erase a little bit. I'm going to turn it this way. It's okay, turn your pages around. There we go. I just want to get it nice and pointy. Okay, and then I can just crisp up any edges that I need to. Alrighty. So now that that's done, we have to make our reflective highlight. So I'm just going to go in real quick with my eraser. Here. Here. I made them, I guess this eraser is a little too chunky, so I'm just going to go in and make this edge just a little darker. Okay. Really try when you do the reflective edge to just use it real thin. There we go, that's thinner. I'm just going to adjust. You might not always see this reflective edge, but I do want you guys to be aware of its existence, so if you do see it, you know what it is. Alright, so now once we do that, we're just going to go in, fill in our background, nice and gently, nice and smooth, nice and light. So the only lines that I still see in my forms are the ones that where it's touching in the light value and the highlight. Alright, so that's cone. So now we've done the 3 rounded forms, sphere, cylinder, and cone. So now we're going to move on to the flat forms. So we're going to be working on the cuboids, C-U-B-O-I-D. Cuboid is cube, rectangular prism. Okay, they're flat. They're pretty much like cousins. They're based, on the same kind of formation, except one is a rectangle, one is a square. Alright, so we'll be doing that now. So the difference between these are, like here, everything was blending. We had white blending into light, blending into medium, blending into dark, the same thing, right? Light, medium, dark, light, medium, dark, light, medium, dark. But everything is very soft and smooth and required a lot of layering and back and forth for the flat forms. We're just making the actual sides solid. Okay, so let's start. We're going to draw a cube. So remember from our other lessons, starting with horizontal line, and I'm starting it really lightly. I'm using my ghost type lines here just so I can make sure it's straight, and sometimes we won't notice that it's not fully straight till we start adding value. So here I did it a little crooked. I'm just going to erase and fix it. So again, sometimes we won't notice that it's crooked until we start adding our other edges or even adding the shading. So let's begin, and if I see anything that needs to be fixed, I will let you know. And actually, now that I'm looking, I feel like this can be straighter, and so could this. So you can see here, this is very slight, this is a little more. So I just want to make sure that my lines are vertical, not tilted, because at the end it's going to throw it off. Alright, so here, so remember when we do the shortcut for the cube, diagonal lines. If you guys are still having problems drawing these, please go back and watch the video for drawing forms, the shortcuts, because that's what we're doing. We're using the shortcuts here. So this back line is horizontally straight, and this is vertical. So notice how I didn't go out to this line that I made here. I'm just going straight down, and actually I'm looking at it, and I feel like it could be a little straighter. So it's just very slight, but that slight adjustment really just makes a difference there, okay? So we're going to draw our cube, and then we're going to draw a rectangular prism below it. Not right next to it, because I do want to leave space for my cast shadow. Okay, so let's go ahead I'm going to draw a rectangle. We're going to draw one standing up. So I'm starting with a short horizontal line. And then 2 vertical lines and another horizontal one going across. Make sure it's straight. I feel like this one probably could be a little straighter. So could this side. And it's okay. You just fix it, guys. And just erase the extra lines. Oh, I erased too much there. So I'm just going to go ahead and redraw it. Oops. Oops. Now this one we're going to make go the opposite direction. So I'm going to have my diagonal lines going that way. Connected by a vertical, horizontal. So it's the same idea as when we drew the cube, except it's just using rectangles. And now looking at it, I feel like mine is just a little on the crooked side. So I'm just going to fix it. No big deal. Just clean up my edge. Same thing here. Just clean up the edge. Alright. I feel like this can probably be a little on the straighter side. So because I fixed it there, now I have to fix it here. Okay? So again, sometimes you notice and have to adjust other things just to kind of match it. And that's okay. Alrighty. There we go. Alright, so now I have my rectangular prism and my cube. I'm going to make my little background line. And you never want to draw it like below the back edge of whatever form is highest, because then it looks like it's floating or hanging off at the surface. So I'm going to have my line from here. I'm lifting and then continuing it there. Oops. Alright. So now we're ready to start shading, but before we shade, we have to identify our light source. So in this case, we're going to have the light source on the left. Okay, so we've drawn it, step 1. Step 2, identify the light source. Step 3, we're going to start shading. So we're going to start with the lightest. So the lightest value is the tops. We're leaving those white of the paper. They're just going to stay completely white. And I noticed that this looks a little crooked, even so, look. And I was almost up to shading. I'm just going to fix that a little bit. There we go. My artist OCD. So the tops are staying white. Step 2 is we're going to add medium. So we're adding medium to whichever sides are not on the top, but also not farthest away. So this is farthest away, so this is going to be medium. So I'm just going to go in with the side of my pencil. So it's like when we made our value scales, okay? We're not blending here in terms of the transitions, but we are blending in terms of like we want the shading to be even and smooth. I shouldn't see lines. It should be nice and smooth. Okay, so I'm going to now concentrate on my edges. I'm not pressing too hard, but my edges should be sharp. So you're going to notice the lines are disappearing again here. I'm going to turn my page this way so I can get this edge. It's just hard to do it from the other direction, and I'm a lefty. So you might have to turn it when you do the right hand, the right side, whatever's comfortable for you. Then I'm going to turn it one more time just to kind of get this bottom. And I just want to make sure that everything is smooth and even. The idea is smooth and even. So there we go, and then I can just go in and erase any little parts I got out of the edge. And then I'm going to come down here and do the same thing here. This is a little skinnier because it's a rectangular prism. So I'm going to kind of angle my paper so I can get that little edge. Angle my paper again so I can get this edge properly. Okay. There goes that. Then I can erase any edges that I went over. Alright, so now we're ready for our darkest value. So we have light, medium, and now this side and this edge, because they're the farthest away, those are going to be the darkest. So I'll start up here. So I'm not going to press too hard yet. It does look darker, but I like to give it like a layer. So I'm going to go in, and oops, over there I went over my line a little. I'll just gonna erase, so no big deal. Just clean it up. And when I try to do dark pressure and I'm trying to control it, I like to hold the pencil a little closer to the edge when I'm doing gradation. It just helps for the control because you are pressing, you're using more pressure. Okay, and then I'm going to turn it this way. So again, you are constantly turning your paper. You want to get nice straight edges, nice and crisp. The lines definitely disappear here. Clean up your edges here. And when I clean them up, sometimes I kind of erase a little in. There we go. All right, and I'm going to do the same thing here. And I'm noticing this looks a little on the crooked side, so there, yep, there we go. I fixed that. Now I'm going to go in and just, so sometimes when I shade, I just like to get it light. Depends on my mood, but I just want to like fill it in. Have like a layer there first. Then I'm going to go in and just get my edges. I'm going to get this edge here. But notice how my pencil marks are becoming solid, right? It's not the point of my pencil. Again, I'm using the side. I'm going to go in and just grab this a little firmer just so I can make this edge more crisp. I'm going to turn my page. I just need a little more control here. Okay, and I'm going to turn here because I really need to separate where the medium and the dark are. Making sure my edges are nice and crisp. And then I'm going to have to, I already see the edge, I'm going to have to fix that. I'll erase a little bit. Okay, so just right here, I'm just going to cut across and just erase a little tiny drop. Alright, so now we're done with that. Now we are ready to start adding our cast shadow. So for this one, if the light is here, the shadow is coming this way. Okay, and these lines should be parallel to each other in the same angle. I'm not going to go too dark. I'm just trying to figure out how far out I want to go. Alright, and this back edge is going to be parallel to the bottom of this cube. It's okay if it goes a little to the behind it. There we go. And now I'm going to figure this out before I darken them. So this is going to go, since the light source is there, it's going at an angle downward. And now since this is horizontal, this bottom is going to be horizontal as well. Notice how this looks more like a square shadow and this shadow is more like a rectangle. So the shadows match whatever the shape of the form that is making the shadow. Just like if you were standing outside and the sun was behind you, your shadow would look like a person. You wouldn't see your clothes or anything, but you would see your arms, your legs. It would match like a person's kind of body. So, alright, so now that I have that, I can go in and start making it darker, but also let's not forget our reflective light. So just be very gentle with it. Sometimes it comes out thinner than others. Just very subtle. Same thing here. So if it gets too dirty, like here, it got a little dirty, I'm just going to go, I have a blank paper over here, I'm just erasing on it. And then you're going to see how the eraser gets clean. So you might have to clean it before you do this. Okay. So that reflective shadow got a little chunky for my liking, so I'm just going to go in and just thin it out. Alright, so now we're ready to shade this cast shadow. So I'm going to go in and just press, make a dark value here, my edges, dark values, and then I'm going to just fill it in solid. Okay, same thing here. And then you can go in and clean your edges. Make sure your eraser's clean though. If your eraser's dirty, it's going to kind of be smudging around. And then here I just noticed this edge should kind of come straight from the cube. Alrighty. Now I'm going to go down here and I'm going to start shading this in. So I got really dark on this edge, right, of this form. So I'm just going to have to go in and make this shade, this cast shadow even darker. So you're just going to start to look shiny. But that's the idea. We always want to start with our lightest value and build to the darkest, and we get contrast there because the contrast is really important. That's the difference between light and dark in terms of value. So we want to have light touching dark, dark touching light, light touching medium, dark touching medium. So that's the idea there. Then you can go ahead and clean your shadows. Okay. This one's kind of angling. Let me fix that. Make it a little straighter because the rectangular prism is straight. And if you've smudged along the way, just fix. I see some smudges here. Just fix them. Erase. Okay, so once we're done with that, just going to go again and just add our little background value. Just clean up wherever I need to. Alright, so that is the cuboid. So next we're going to do triangular prism. So we're also going to do 2 of these, and we have to draw them first. So let's just label this triangular prism. Alright, and the reason I go it's because sometimes when you write or you erase, there's like crumbs from the lead or the eraser. We just want to make sure that we're blowing them off instead of like smudging them around. Alright, so now we're going to start with, I'm going to switch pencils because that pencil's getting a little dull on me, so I'm going to use this pencil. So I'm going to start with drawing a horizontal line, like a little above this line, that way I can do another background there. Horizontal line going across. Then I'm going to add a little tiny dot there. The reason I'm doing that is so I can connect my rectangular prism right there. So it's downward facing and it's not too tall, this prism. This triangle, it's like shorter than it is wide, and then from there I'm just going to go make a vertical line, okay? And then I'm going to make 2 more vertical lines, but these are going to be shorter than the middle one. Right, and then here